understanding young and old wines. A bottle of wine is a living thing. From the vine, through the wine cellar, as grape juice is turned into wine, the chemical compounds that create the wine's aromas and textures change and new flavors develop. This process continues after a wine is bottled. New flavors form while others disappear. However, not all wines are meant to age for years and years. In fact, most wines produced in the world are meant to be drunk young. The finest wines, however, can lie in a cellar for years on end and become the most gloriously complex liquid waiting to be tasted. In this lesson, we are going to look at the differences between young and old wines and some of the changes that happen in the bottle as wines age. Let's start by learning about young wines. First, let's define what a young wine is. Generally speaking, a young white wine is anywhere from just bottled to 3 years old. A young red wine is about 5 years old or younger. Primary flavors in young wines are the most prominent. These are the fruity flavors that come from the grape itself. If the wine has been aged in oak barrels, the oak-derived flavors are also more prominent in a wine's youth. Young red wines, however, can be quite closed and tannic. As wines age, they soften, but there is a way to help open a wine and get the most of its flavors, even when it is young. You can simply decant it. Decanting wine is simply to transfer the wine from the bottle in which it has been bottled and stored into a dedicated wine decanter designed for the purpose. These decanters come in many shapes and sizes, but you will usually recognize them as large glass jugs with long necks for pouring the wine into glasses. We will learn about how to decant in a later lesson, but for now you need to know how decanting helps a young wine. Decanting a younger wine allows the wine which has been trapped in a bottle for a long period of time to come into contact with oxygen and breathe. The wine softens and the exposure to oxygen brings out all of its wonderful flavors and aromas. Let's take a closer look at older wines. One of the most incredible things about wine is its ability to develop more complex and interesting aromas with age. Wines that age well generally have well-structured tannins that can either come from the fruit skins or the wood of the barrels. Another component that adds to the aging quality of a wine is a vibrant acidity that originates from the natural fruit acids. These two elements act as preservatives and allow wines to age. Most red wines age for 5 to 8 years, but the very best can age for up to 30 years. Let's understand what happens to red wines as they age. As a red wine is made and bottled, small amounts of oxygen are mixed up with the wine. This oxygen allows for different chemical compounds in the wine to interact, in a process known as polymerization. This is a big word that simply means the combining of smaller things into large ones. In red wine, some of these chemical compounds are tannins, and the compounds responsible for the wine's red color. The tannins and color compounds come together to form large molecules. When these molecules become too heavy, they fall out of the wine. At the same time, the chemicals responsible for a wine's flavor also combine and change, adding complexity to the wine's flavor and aroma. What do you think happens to red wine if the color compounds and tannins are falling out of the wine? Correct. They become lighter and less tannic. These heavy molecules that fall out of the wine make up the sediment you see in older wines. In the next 2 lessons, we are going to learn about the art of decanting. Decanting is a way of serving old wine to make sure that none of the sediment ends up in a guest's glass. Well done on learning about young and old wines. old wine service. Now that we have learned more about old and new wines and how they differ, we can move on to wine service. Handling old wine requires some closer care and attention. So in this lesson you will learn about fetching old wine, using a decanting basket, presenting an old wine, and how to open an old wine. Let's start by learning about fetching old wine. Old wine is fragile and should be handled very carefully. It is always a special occasion for your guests when a fine old bottle of wine is open, and your job is to make sure the occasion is perfect. The most important thing to remember is to be gentle. If the bottle moves, too much sediment can mix with the wine and will spoil the occasion. Wines are normally stored lying down. Whatever the position the bottle is in when you collect it from the cellar or wine storage area is the position it must remain in until you decant it. This means knowing how to use a decanting basket. So let's look at 5 steps for using a decanting basket correctly. Step 1. Line the basket with a clean napkin. Because you don't want the bottle to move around in the basket, the first step is to line your decanting basket with a serviette. Step 2. Find the correct wine. Make sure you have found the correct wine before you take it out. Be careful not to turn any of the wines when you look for the right bottle. You don't want to disturb them. Step 3. Remove the bottle. When you are sure that you have the correct bottle, slowly take the bottle out, keeping it at the same angle so the sediment is not disturbed. Step 4. Maneuver the decanting basket around the bottle. Do not place the bottle into the basket. Watch it again. The basket moves while the bottle stays still. Step 5. Now you can gently take the bottle of wine to your service cart or wine station. If the wine you are fetching has been stored with the label facing down, do not turn it around when you place it in the decanting basket. Just place it in the basket as is, and you can explain to the guest later why the label is not facing up. Let's look at presenting an old wine to the host. Gently bring the bottle in the decanting basket from the service cart and present it to the host. Just like in normal wine service, describe the wine you are presenting. When the host has confirmed that this is the correct wine, you can carefully take the wine in the decanting basket back to the service cart. Remember, if the bottle was not stored with the label facing up, do not turn it around. Present the bottle as it is and explain the situation to the guests. Explain to them how you do not want to disturb the sediment in the wine. Finally, we can look at how to open an old wine. Because we want the wine to move as little as possible, the wine will be opened inside the decanting basket. Here are 6 steps to follow in opening an old bottle of wine. Step 1. If the angle of the bottle in the decanting basket is too low, use a serviette to prop it up. The angle must be high enough so the wine doesn't spill when the bottle is opened. Step 2. Remove the foil as cleanly as possible at the second lip or ridge, and place the foil in your pocket. Step 3. Wipe the lip of the bottle to remove any dust or mold that may have accumulated. Step 4. Carefully extract the cork with your waiter's friend, keeping the bottle as still as possible. Remember to finish pulling the cork out by hand without it making any sound. There is no rush. Be slow and gentle. Older corks are more delicate than new ones, so you should be extra careful. Step 5. Place the cork on an underliner and present it to the guest for inspection. Step 6. Wipe the lip of the bottle again with your service cloth to make sure there are no bits of cork left on the bottle. Well done on learning how to correctly fetch and open an old bottle of wine. Enjoy serving these long-lived wines to your guests, and remember, always be gentle. In the next lesson, we will look at how to decant a wine. How to decant wine. Decanting is one of the most specific and advanced procedures involved in the service of wine. Guests will be very particular about decanting, so it is crucial that you understand how to do it. In this lesson, we are going to look at the equipment used for decanting and decanting a bottle of wine. Let's start by taking a look at the equipment used for decanting. When decanting a wine, you will need all the equipment for standard wine service, as well as a couple of extra items. These are 1. A decanter. If you don't have a decanter and your guests ask for one, you can use a glass jug. It is very important that you practice pouring from the particular decanter at your establishment. Designs differ, and some can be quite tricky, so make sure to master this technique with water before service. 2. An extra underliner to place the decanter on after pouring. 3. A service cart or wine station where you can open and decant the wine. If you do not have a service cart at your establishment, you can decant the wine at your wine station. 4. A candle and a lighter to light it. The lit candle will be used to illuminate the bottle as you pour. 5. A decanting basket. A specially made basket used to bring up an old bottle of wine from the cellar. Now that we have the necessary equipment, let's look at decanting a bottle of wine in 6 steps. Step 1. Prepare. Before you decant a bottle of wine, make sure you have all your equipment ready. Step 2. Fetch the wine. For old wines, you will need to use the decanting basket like we learnt in the last lesson. Be gentle when transporting old wine, and make sure the bottle is clean. Now is the best time to light your candle. Always light the candle away from the guests. Now that everything is ready, you can roll the service cart to the guest's table and present the wine. Step 3. Present the wine. Bring the bottle from the service cart and present it to the host. Just like in normal wine service, describe the wine you are presenting. When the host has confirmed that it is the correct wine, you can take the wine back to the service cart. Remember, with old wines, if the bottle was not stored with the label facing up, do not turn it around. Present the bottle as it is and explain to them how you do not want to disturb the sediment in the wine. Step 4. Open the wine. Now you are ready to open the wine. With younger wines, you may proceed as you would with a standard wine service. With old wines, the wine will be opened inside the decanting basket. Remember the 6 steps we learnt in the last lesson. Step 5. Pour the bottle into the decanter. For young wines, simply hold the decanter by the base and begin to pour the wine from the bottle. With your other hand, hold the decanter by the base. And be careful not to pour too fast. For old wines, You will need to carefully take the bottle out of the basket and hold it a safe distance above the candle that you lit previously, close enough so that you can see the flame through the bottle's neck. With your other hand, hold the decanter by the neck. Now you can begin to pour the wine from the bottle into the decanter slowly and gently. Make sure that as the bottle empties, you have a good view of the bottle's neck and the light from the candle is illuminating it from beneath. This allows you to see the sediment before it goes into the decanter. Do not let the neck of the bottle touch the decanter, and never look away as you pour, otherwise you may not see the sediment and it will get into the guest's wine. Only stop pouring when you see the sediment. When you do, stop pouring immediately, as you do not want any of the sediment going into the decanter. Step 6. Serve the wine. Place the decanter on your service cart. Wipe any drips that may be on the bottle with your service cloth, and place the bottle on an underliner with the label facing the guest. Now you can pour a taster for the host, and carry on serving the wine like we have already learnt. Ask the host if they would like you to leave the decanter and bottle on the table. If they do, make sure both are placed on underliners. Finally, ask the host if you may remove the cork. Let's recap what we have learnt about decanting. The equipment used for decanting, and decanting a bottle of wine. Congratulations on learning about how best to decant a bottle of wine. Good luck decanting wines young and old, and enjoy presenting them to your guests. Serving dessert and fortified wines. When guests have finished their meal, they may want to enjoy an after-dinner drink. Some of these drinks may include brandy or fortified and dessert wines. These are excellent drinks to round off a meal, and it is top-class service to offer your guests a selection of them when they have finished eating. In this lesson, we are going to learn briefly about brandy, before learning how to serve dessert wine, port, or brandy. Let's start by learning a little about brandy. Brandy is a spirit that is made from distilled grape juice. Still wine is made from white grapes before it goes through a process known as distillation. Distillation means the wine is heated so its alcohol and water are separated. Alcohol boils at a lower temperature than water, so it will evaporate out, leaving the water behind. The alcohol is then condensed and collected, leaving you with a strong liquid with a high percentage of alcohol. This strong drink was known by the Dutch as brandewijn, or fire wine, because of its high alcoholic strength. This alcoholic spirit created from distillation is then matured for a long period of time in oak casks, where it mellows, gains complex flavors and aromas, and takes on its dark amber color. The most famous brandies come from two places in France: Cognac and Armagnac. Just like many French wines, these brandies take their name from the place they are made. No other brandies may use the names Cognac or Armagnac on their labels. South Africa also makes excellent brandies that are slightly fruitier than the French versions, but can be just as good quality. Now that we know a little bit about brandy, we can learn how to correctly serve dessert wines, port, and brandy. If the guests are having dessert or a cheese course, you can offer them a dessert wine or port to accompany these foods. Brandy is usually served after the meal. As always, make sure you have correctly read your establishment's wine list so that you know what dessert wines you offer. Sometimes your guests may order a whole bottle of dessert wine. If so, you serve it just like you would a normal bottle of white wine, bringing the correct glassware, presenting, opening, pouring the wine, and leaving the bottle either in the ice bucket or on the table depending on what the guest prefers. It is important to know which dessert wines your establishment sells by the glass. If a guest orders a glass of dessert wine, you serve it just how you would a glass of table wine. Let's learn about how to serve port or brandy. Port is usually served with the cheese course or after the meal. Before we learn the correct steps, let's take a look at the equipment you will need to serve port and brandy correctly. Measuring jiggers. Stronger drinks are measured out in a jigger. The one side holds a single shot and the other a larger amount. The larger side is generally double the smaller side. A line service tray. This is to carry the drinks and equipment to the table. Appropriate glassware. Like we learnt in the first step, make sure you have the correct glassware for the correct beverage. So, port glasses for port, or brandy snifters for brandy. Every establishment will have different sizes as their standard serving for these sorts of drinks. It is very important you know exactly how much a single serving is. Ideally, you would like to use a service cart to serve these beverages, so you can measure the drinks at the table. Let's look at the steps for serving these drinks if you're using a service cart. Step 1. Bring the wine list and ask the table if they would like to order any after-dinner wines. Step 2. Take the order. Remember to repeat each order back to the guests. Step 3. If you are using a service cart, prepare all of your equipment with the selected drinks, glasses, and equipment and take it to the table. Step 4. Measure the correct amount and pour it into the glass using a jigger. Step 5. Present to the right of the guests. If you do not have a service cart, you will bring the correct glassware out to the table and place it to the right of the guests. Then bring the drinks on the lined tray and pour the correct amount. This is tricky if you're not using a jigger. If you know you will have to serve port or brandy in this way, make sure to practice pouring water into different glasses with a jigger so that you know the correct amounts to pour. If a table orders a bottle of port, ask if they would like it decanted or not, and serve it just how you would a bottle of red table wine, but using the correct glassware, of course. Well done on learning about after-dinner wines. Serving these wines with confidence will help to end off a meal brilliantly. Wine thoughts. Wine is a living thing. The chemicals that create the tastes, aromas, and textures of wine change and develop as a wine ages and matures. While this makes wine a fascinating beverage full of mystery, It also means that things can go wrong and a wine can turn bad. In this lesson, we are going to learn about the most typical ways wine can be faulty. These are called wine faults. We will finish off by explaining how best to deal with guests and faulty wine during service. In this lesson, we will look at oxidation, cork taint, cooked wine, re-fermentation, microbial damage, and how to deal with a faulty wine. Let's start by understanding oxidation. What happens if you take a bite of an apple and leave it for a while? That's right, the white flesh turns brown. This is the result of oxygen molecules interacting with molecules in the fruit. Because wine is made from fruit, it's the exact same thing. Wines become oxidized if they are left open for too long. Most wines can be kept open for up to 2 days before they start showing signs of oxidation. When a wine is oxidized, it loses its brightness in both color and flavor. Bright reds turn brick red or brownish, and fresh flavors take on drier, more bitter characteristics. White wines oxidize quicker than reds because tannins in red wine help protect it from oxygen. Wines will also become oxidized if the cork has been damaged and oxygen finds its way into the bottle. If your establishment serves wine by the glass, it's important that the open bottles are checked before service to ensure they are still in good condition. Next, let's find out about cork taint. Cork taint causes the wine to smell and taste moldy, like wet newspaper or a smelly dog. It's caused by a chemical known as TCA, or 2,4,6-trichloranisole. This chemical has somehow found its way into the wine during the production process. This is nearly always through the cork. The chemical TCA infects cork trees. The infected cork is then inserted into the bottle and the chemical is passed on into the wine. It is estimated that of all wines closed with corks, 2 to 4% are infected with TCA. Cork taint is the second most common wine fault. Next, let's find out about cooked wine. Cooked wine is wine that has been damaged by exposure to high temperatures. Rarely bad cases can be spotted before a wine is opened, if the cork is pushed out a little, or if the wine has leaked through the cork. This is due to increased pressure inside the bottle as the wine heats up. But you will not always be able to spot this. Cooked wine smells and tastes jammy, like canned fruit. This is why it is very important to store wines in a cool environment where the temperature is stable. But unfortunately, even if you do this, you do not know where the wine has been before it has got to you. Next, let's learn about re-fermentation. Re-fermentation occurs when wine still has yeast or bacteria in it that causes another re-fermentation to start after the wine is bottled. This will result in the wine being fizzy. The only wine you want to be fizzy is sparkling wine. If it's not sparkling wine and it's fizzy, it's a fault. The final wine fault is microbial damage. There are millions of different types of bacteria in the world. Some are good, some are bad. Every now and again, bad bacteria finds its way into a bottle and spoils it. Different bacteria will cause different faults, but they will all cause off aromas in the wine. Typical aromas are medicinal, like Band-Aids or rubbing alcohol. Others are like a rodent cage or a dirty farmyard. Or even sour, yeasty smells like beer. Finally, let's learn how to deal with a faulty wine. Unless the cork has been pushed out from heat damage, it's impossible to know if a wine is faulty before it's opened. This is why you always serve the host a small taster, so they can check to see if the wine is in good condition. If the host rejects the wine, apologize and immediately remove the bottle and the glass from the table. If you are confident in your knowledge of wine faults, check if the bottle is faulty in the back of house. If you are not, have your manager assess the bottle. If the bottle is faulty, offer the host another bottle of the same wine. They may want a different bottle, but they would generally prefer a bottle of the same wine that is in good condition. If you or your manager decide there is nothing wrong with the wine, offer the wine list again so they can make another selection. There is little point in offering the same wine, as the customer would just reject it again. The most important thing is to never ever put your guests in the position of being wrong. Never argue with the guests, and if you are unsure in certain situations, speak to your manager. Wine is a beautiful living thing, and wine faults are all part of this, so don't worry if a guest rejects the wine. But to avoid some faults, always make sure your wine has been stored correctly. Selling more wine. As a waiter, your first job is to give guests the best experience possible. But you also have the responsibility of making your establishment and yourself money. Selling more wine is an excellent way to take home more cash. In this lesson, we are going to learn a few ways in which you can sell more wine without making your guests feel uncomfortable. Remember, your guest's experience comes first. No matter how much wine you want to sell, you should never ever hound the guest or push them to buy more expensive bottles. We will say it again, the guest's experience comes first. To learn how to increase wine sales, we will look at wine knowledge, good recommendations, attitude, and 2 tips for selling more wine. Let's start with wine knowledge. On this course, you have already learned how important it is to be knowledgeable of your establishment's wine list. This is not only so you can offer excellent service and provide guests with the wines they'll enjoy, but also to make sure you sell more wine. By giving your guests small amounts of information about specific wine and wine in general, you will help gain the trust of your guests. Guests that trust your wine knowledge will be more likely to take your recommendations. But remember, your guests do not want a lecture on wine, just a few bits of information that will add enjoyment to their dining experience. Now that you know your wine list, let's see how you can make the most of it by making good recommendations. In the first subject of this level, we learned the basics of wine and food pairing. You need to use this knowledge when recommending wines. Thankfully, there is a wine for every occasion, so you should be able to offer different wines throughout a guest's meal. More opportunities equals more wine sold. It's not just the type of wine, but the times at which you can suggest more wine to your guests. Before meals, white, rosé, sparkling wine and light dry sherry make excellent aperitifs. You can offer these wines as soon as the guests have been seated and have been presented with menus. For example, "Good evening. May I suggest an aperitif to start your meal? I have some excellent sparkling wines or dry white wines if you would like me to make a recommendation." Dry white wines are good options to accompany a first course. A hearty red wine can complement the main course, and a sweet dessert wine or sparkling wine are great with dessert. Port, sherry, or Madeira can be suggested at the same time the coffee orders are taken. If you are ever in doubt, you can always suggest champagne, as it can be served throughout a meal. Now that you are making good suggestions, let's look at the best attitude to adopt to make your recommendations even more effective. Confidence is key to selling more wine. Armed with your knowledge of the wine list, confidently make suggestions. For example, Madam, may I suggest this 2005 Cabernet Sauvignon from Mountain Lake Vineyards? Is much better than... Madam, there is a wine you might like. I'm not sure. It's a 2005 Cabernet Sauvignon from Mountain Lake Vineyards. You should always maintain a quiet and calm demeanor at the table, but you should be excited about wines you recommend. If you suggest a Sauvignon Blanc as an aperitif, make sure it sounds delicious when you recommend it. For example, Madam, may I suggest this Cape Point Vineyards Sauvignon Blanc as an aperitif to start off your meal? It's a fresh and lively wine from South Africa and is the perfect way to start off your evening. It's much more enticing than... Good evening, madam. May I suggest the Cape Point Vineyards Sauvignon Blanc? If you are confident with your recommendations, excited about the wines you sell, and are always courteous towards your guests, you will be selling more wine in no time. Finally, let's look at 2 tips for selling more wine. Number 1. Make use of special occasions. If you know that someone at your table is celebrating a birthday, anniversary, or any other special occasion, offer them some champagne. For example, good evening, madam. I see it's your birthday. Congratulations. May I suggest some champagne, as this is such a special occasion? Number 2. Use language that promotes a sale. When you are recommending a second bottle or glass of wine, instead of saying, "May I offer you another glass of wine?" say, "Sir, may I offer you another glass of the same wine, or would you like something different?" If you apply these tips, along with useful recommendations based on good wine knowledge, you will see your wine sales increase very quickly. Good luck on selling more wines with confidence.